Okay, well, welcome everybody. There's probably a lot more people who will be joining us because approximately 75 people have RSVPs, which is pretty exciting. So today we're gonna be talking about we the people versus campaign cash. And it certainly is a timely discussion given the craziness and the record amount of money sloshing around in our last federal elections. And I think it's also because a lot of us feel so overwhelmed by the political environment. It's a good opportunity to pivot and focus our efforts on how to influence state and local politics, and particularly pushing for campaign finance bills, in our case in Virginia, in our General Assembly, which starts on January 8th. I'm Nancy Morgan, the coordinator of Big Money Out, which advocates for getting money out of politics both federally and Virginia. And we're really excited to welcome our speakers tonight, which include Marie HenselderKimmel. I've always stumbled over that, but she is from our national organization, American Promise, which advocates for an amendment to the Constitution, which would allow Congress and the states to regulate election spending. And we're so excited also to welcome two great citizen advocates, Pulitzer Prize-winning New York Times journalist Hedrick Smith and Sam Daley-Harri, who will guide us in a discussion about how we can all be better citizen activists. And I really invite you to put all your questions in the chat and think creatively about how we, the people, can better advocate for policies which benefit us rather than deep-pocketed special interests. And I noticed when I was looking at the people who signed up, we have people from all over the country, and please introduce yourself in the chat. It's really exciting when I looked, and I don't know if he's online, but one of the people who signed was George Penn from Wisconsin, from Move to Amend Wisconsin, who has done remarkable work in terms of getting local communities to call for reform. So what we want is to have this, is to be an open forum and get your questions and hear your ideas. So to start us off, it's really my pleasure, Grant, to introduce my colleague and really good friend for many years, Dr. Marie HenselderKimmel, who is the New Jersey coordinator for American Promise, a nonpartisan group that I mentioned that's working on this aforementioned amendment. She's a retired OG OBGYN from Cherry Hill, New Jersey. And she was inspired just as a physician to engage in citizen activism to reform our broken campaign finance system with a specific look at the influence on its dysfunctional healthcare system. And I think we can look at every single policy, whether it's based on energy policies or broadband, private prisons, everything that we have, all of the policies we care about are influenced by money and politics. So Marie, welcome. You have the floor.
Thank you so much for joining us this evening. I am going to try to do two things. I'm going to try to give you a little overview of the campaign finance reform activity that's going on the national level with American Promise, but also do a little review of what's just happened as far as we know. There will still be some developments of revelations, but at least where we are right now. I'm going to share my screen with you. So, the story of the 2024 election could be told as the battle of the billionaires. In this corner, for Donald Trump, we have the richest man in the world, Elon Musk. Versus this corner, Kamala Harris, we have Shark Tank billionaire, Mark Cuban. It was a first to see billionaires as surrogates for candidates. And if all they did was appear and give their endorsements, that would have just been free speech, right? But there's a deeper story of the relentlessly escalating amounts of money to gain influence by billionaires and other big money donors in our elections. There's a deep irony that, in fact, a top issue for voters this year was the financial difficulties of everyday Americans that are challenged to make ends meet by price inflation and skyrocketing housing costs. The founders, this is James Madison, established a democratic republic. In a direct democracy, each citizen would get together and we would all vote at once. But we have a scheme of representation. The idea of a republic revolves around the relationship between constituents and their representatives. Constituents choose a representative to best look after their interests in government by casting their one vote in an election. It's a sacrosanct relationship. But our broken campaign finance system undermines this relationship. The green, as you can tell, is money in the groups on the right, and the constituents they do contribute some money, but they should mostly be able to contribute their ideas and their support by a vote. However, the money of donors who are not constituents through dark money organizations and super PACs from outside the district, outside the state, and even outside the country use the power of money to amplify their messages with advertising and many other forms of influence to dominate our elections and drown out the free speech rights and influence of ordinary Americans in our own elections. Often that messaging is negative with attack ads against the candidate that special interests want to defeat. I'm going to give you a reference marker here, just to get your idea around the scope of the perspective. What millions and billions, we kind of forget this. We throw these words around all the time. 1 million seconds is 11 days. 1 billion seconds is 31 years. Okay. So we're going to talk first about these top donors, these billionaires. What did they do other than stand up on a stage and talk about their candidate? They donated money. And this chart is from Open Secrets. It's actually from before the latest FEC filings that were made public on the 6th of December. The top 10 donors are listed here. And as you can see, they donate a little bit directly to the candidate. Mostly they're donating to outside groups in the range of millions upon millions of dollars. And Timothy and Patricia Mellon, a couple, had donated 150 million. Elon Musk's amount donated was 118 million before the December 6th filings came in, and those were updated. Musk actually had another $127 million that he had donated, and because they often time these donations very close to when deadlines are striking so that they don't actually, they aren't revealed. 270, he is the top donor for 2024, which he is the richest man in the world. So here you go. Mellon donated more too, 197 million. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of 31 years per billion, right? Times 277. You and I probably don't have a prayer of having any kind of influence like that. So who gives what? Let's look at two guys. Average Joe sitting in his armchair and the fat cat on the right. Okay, so the average Joe, ordinary citizen, he's got a little bit of money to spend on politics. So where does he usually give it, if he gives it at all? He does what people do directly to candidates, and he has a limit of $3,300 directly to the campaign of the candidate, or to a political action committee, $5,000. And that's those numbers are disclosed. The fact that he is the one who donated them, that's disclosed. Well, the fat cat can do that too. That's a limited amount of spending they can do. And we saw from the previous graph, they do it. On the right side are all the places, the additional places where the wealthy person can put their money. It's called outside spending, which means that it's outside of the control of the candidate, and it's supposed to be outside of coordination with the candidate. It's also called independent spending. One place that we know about, we have heard a lot about, is super PACs. Those groups don't have any limit. You can donate, the sky's the limit. You can put in as much as you want. It could be one person putting all the money into a super PAC, which sometimes happens, but many of them take many, many donors. And the donors' names are disclosed. So if Joe Smith wants to donate directly to a super PAC, he can, as much as he wants or she wants, but it will say Joe Smith. That's kind of the way things happened in the first half of the last decade. Mostly if there was a donation to a super PAC, that's the way it happened. There were some organizations that donate too. But the other option is dark money groups. Dark money means they do not need to disclose. They can keep completely obscure who gave them the money. And usually they have very sympathetic sounding names, like Americans Love Apple Pie. You don't know if it's about cryptocurrency or it's about oil rigs or it's whatever. You don't know what it's about. Or it might be about apples, it might not. They don't have to say who donates to them, but they can donate to super PACs. So you'll see Americans Love Apple Pie donated $5 million to the ABC super PAC, and you don't know who's behind that money. That's dark money. The issue is, and this is actually from 2022, but the numbers are very similar when you go back over the last decade and a half, that fewer than 1% of Americans donate more than $200. And even when you consider who donates at all, it's only a couple more percentage. It's like 5%, or it's less than 10% for sure, but maybe 5% of all Americans donate at all. Fewer donate more than $200. And of that less than 1%, they account for 75% of the donations by individuals. That's a lot of donations by a very few number of people. So 5 takeaways from the 2024 elections. We talked about the mega donors, number 3. Top 50 donors gave $1.7 billion in the mega donors. The total spending for the federal elections, which is Congress and the president, was about just a little under $16 billion that has been disclosed so far, and about $4.5 billion to states. The outside spending that I just mentioned, that topped $4.5 billion. I'm going to touch on that in a second. And a record of more than $1 billion in dark money to independent groups was spent. In addition, there were a lot of ballot measures this year. The ballot measure committees raised more than $1.4 billion. Here's the slide about the total cost of elections. You can see each presidential year, every 4 years, the spending does increase, and it has been increasing since back in 2000. But you notice over here at 2010, there's a red asterisk. That's when the Citizens United Supreme Court decision came down that made it so that uncoordinated outside spending by these groups, these independent expenditure groups, would be unlimited. And you can see that there started to be an escalation in spending, especially over the last 2 elections. In 2016, we hit a record of, I believe it was just under $7 billion. And the estimates during the 2020 election was, oh my gosh, we're going to see a record. We're going to see $9 billion. The spending was almost $15 billion. And so far, the number that we have for 2024 is another billion. It's about 15.9 billion on the federal elections. That's a lot of money spent around elections for people who can't afford eggs and chicken that are spending it. So this outside spending that I just mentioned, this is the that's spent by groups and individuals outside of the candidates. The candidates don't control these messages. The citizens don't control these messages. The people who have the money control these messages. They put out TV and radio ads, online ads. That spending, as you can see, has been escalating as well. And in 2020, it reached $2.95 billion. And this year, it's up to $4.46 billion. This number can also get bumped up a little bit now with some additional campaign filing deadlines coming. And 2.7 billion of this was by the super PACs. Remember, I told you they have to say who gives them the money, but most of the way that those people are being identified now are as the Americans Love Apple Pie group kind of thing. So that's another shattered record. And dark money and shell groups that don't disclose at all who gives them their money has also been escalating. 2010, remember, was that Citizens United Supreme Court decision. It took almost a decade, almost till 2020, for the first $1 billion of dark money to be spent. And then in 2020, almost another billion was spent. And now in 2024, more than $1 billion has been spent in additional dark money spending. So these are the people who don't tell us who they are. And we don't know. And because they don't have to say who they are, this is where foreign money can go in. It's a little hard. They have to take a couple steps, but they get the foreign money in there. Money from across the, we know money from across the country goes into state races to affect outcomes in state races, and certainly outside of districts within states. So how did this happen? How do we get here? Back in the after the Gilded Age, when the tycoons took over our political took over our politics, basically, a number of campaign finance laws were enacted to restrict corporate money from politics. But in the last 40 years, a series of Supreme Court decisions led to this ruling, Citizens United, that political spending by corporations and legal entities is speech. And because freedom of speech is protected by the First Amendment, then Congress and state legislatures can't place limits on the raising and spending of money. And that led to the formation of the super PACs and the independent nonprofits, expenditure nonprofits that raise and spend unlimited numbers of amount of money. 24 states had campaign finance laws and limits that were their limits for decades that were all overturned by the Citizens United decision. And as the political cartoon says, thanks again to the Supreme Court, my free speech is worth more than yours. The 1% blowing the 99% out of the water. So how do we fix this? Americans want we the people, not money, in charge of our political system and return representation to the people. Because the Supreme Court has put itself in control of campaign finance, an amendment is the permanent solution to solve the problem. The For Our Freedom Amendment is the language that American Promise has come to with input from both sides of the political aisle and by conservative lawmakers of years gone by, input and constitutional attorneys and professors and the people. So it would restore the power of Americans to regulate election spending so that we can protect our freedom, we can have our voices heard, and we can participate as equal citizens in our government. American Promise and other entities over the last decade have been polling uniformly. This idea of controlling money in politics has 80% plus approval across the board. But the idea of it actually having a constitutional amendment to allow Congress and the states to reasonably regulate and limit money in our campaigns and elections has this latest data from October, 77.2% strong or somewhat support across the political spectrum. The thing when you talk to people, because Nancy and I have been doing this for a long time, and several other people here, we've been talking to people about this for about 8 years now. And people say, yeah, right, good luck with a constitutional amendment. That hasn't happened in 50 years. But the founders included amendments in the Constitution to correct our system. And in our history, at times of high political turmoil, we have come together to do this. The Bill of Rights after the founding was a time that we did this. After the Civil War and the deep divisions over slavery, the Civil Rights Amendments were passed. Then after the industrial tycoons really decimated the rights of the working people in the Gilded Age, we had the Progressive Era amendments. And then, of course, in the 60s and 70s, we had the Civil Rights Amendments and a few others tagged on there. So we are certainly in one of those times in our political history where there is high turmoil and division, and that it calls for constitutional correction. And when we work together on these types of problems, we can build there is cross-partisan support among the people. We can help to repair some of the polarization, hopefully, in our legislatures. We have a plan to do this. The plan is work at the states, build state-based ready to ratify campaigns by getting either non-binding resolutions. Here in New Jersey, we have a non-binding resolution. In Virginia, you don't have that, but you did a letter from the legislature supporting this type of action by Congress. 22 states have signed so far, with several more in the process currently, including Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is pretty close. Wisconsin, Arizona, they're working on it. And Michigan, I think, is actually Minnesota is actually pretty close as well. So building the state-based support helps to recruit supporters by members of Congress, since they see what's going on in their state. And then remember, in the amendment process, we need a 2/3 vote in both the House and the Senate. And then the amendment goes back to the states to ratify. We'll need 3/4 of the states. And we feel like because we've built up this support in the state legislators to get the support in Congress, then it's just going to come back and be able to go through in ratification more quickly than hopefully than the Equal Rights Amendment. But that's the plan. We've been targeting 2026 as the 250th anniversary. Between the pandemic and so on, we're a little bit behind where we want it to be, but we're making progress. And we hope that if you're thinking about doing something about money in politics, you'll think about helping Nancy out in Virginia or getting in touch with me here in New Jersey or wherever you are in the States.
Marie,
So
and there is one question from Diana. Is this under the umbrella of campaign finance reform? I guess that the constitutional amendment. There are other on the Capitol, just the Disclose Act and stuff like this. But the constitutional amendment is really the only way that we can curtail spending as opposed to legislation, right?
Because any legislation, the Supreme Court, if it goes to the courts, they're going to say, nope, sorry, we made those decisions. You can't put a limit until we make an amendment to overturn. And 7 of the 27 amendments, 8, excuse me, of the amendments have actually overturned the previous decision of the Supreme Court. So there's precedent for that too.
Yeah, thanks so much for that. So I'm just gonna jump in, and what we're gonna do is Marie made mention that of the states, there were 24 states that actually had to change their campaign finance rules, including, and I'd really recommend that you watch the Dark Money, which is a documentary on based on the Montana case, which they had 100 years of campaign finance reform, but because of Citizens United, they had to they were trying to protect their state from the copper industry interest and stuff. So, but Virginia was not one of them. And lo and behold, when I met Marie, 2017, working on the constitutional amendment, somebody said, "Oh, look at Virginia," and all of us looked sort of terrified because none of us knew anything about state or local politics. So lo and behold, we're sort of a pay-to-play state, but that creates a lot of opportunity, especially, and I hope, I'm sure that Hedrick will focus on this, we really need to look at changes in the state level and local levels. So anybody who know who this guy is? Anybody shout out that name? Okay, yeah, George Santos. I'm sure we all read enough articles about him in terms of his transgressions in New York. But surprisingly enough, he would feel at home in Virginia. And if he ran for our General Assembly, most of the violations that he had in terms of disclosure and use of donations for personal use are legal. And why is that? Because Virginia is one of 5 states that has no limitations at all. And more egregiously, if Marie were running for senator in Virginia, I could be an out-of-state billionaire and I could give her $1 million and she could just go and spend it on a house or taking lobbyists to the Caribbean. I mean, we are the one state. People say that. We tell people that and they're just going, "You're kidding." It's so egregious. And there's no limits of corporations, contributions from corporations. And Marie had said, this goes back to the Gilded Age, and the Tillman Act was passed by Theodore Roosevelt in 1907. They recognize the challenges of when corporations give money to candidates, insufficient disclosure, and limited regulatory oversight. And it is because of this that we have been ranked by the Coalition for Integrity had they called it the Swamp Index in 2020. And Virginia is rated 46 out of the Swamp Index. And it's Utah, Michigan, Arizona, Idaho, and Wyoming who are below us. And that's just based on ranking. They take into consider some campaign finance and ethics reform and some of the policies that reveal how transparent and accountable government policies are to citizens. And so when you look at money coming into elections, this is Marie talked to about the federal elections. We have all this dark money and outside spending come in. This is just money going into our legislators' pockets. And when you look at 2023, that was the year when we had the last one, when we had all the delegates and the senators, it totaled $188 million. Now, I took some open secrets. That's the national organizations. It's one of the best places you can get state level data, and it was only surpassed, we surpassed Florida, California, and Texas. The only state we didn't surpass was Illinois, and that's basically because they have billionaires running for office. And to try to put it on a more level playing field, what I did was I put it on a per capita basis. So when you look at Virginia, basically you take all that money and divide it by 8.7 million, because you really can't compare California and Florida because they have much higher populations. We have the highest per capita spending on our elections in the country. And when you take that data and you disaggregate it, I'm an economist, so I just love looking at data. But when you take that and you say, well, how much money are people giving? Say large donations above $10,000 accounted for 87% of all Virginia contributions. But the interesting thing is, hey, everybody, can you sort of mute yourself because there's sort of some sounds coming from people who have the open mics. But when you look at 83% of donors contribute less than $500 to candidates. And certainly, I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm not going to give $500 to candidate. Maybe I'll give 50 to 100. And that's only 4% of our total contribution. So what does that mean for Virginia citizens? It means basically we have lost our voice. And Virginians care about this. We did a polling with the Wasson Center, which is Christopher Newport University. This was in 2021, and we were sort of nervous because we spent our own money, and it's like, oh my God, what if we don't get the results that we want? But it came out 4 out of 5 Virginians, irrespective of party, support reducing my money from big campaign donors, and 88% want total public disclosure of all contributions. I mean, that's a huge majority. And I just have to go back because this is one of my favorite sayings from John McCain. And we all remember John McCain. It's like our campaign finance system is nothing less than an elaborate influencing peddle scheme in which both parties stay in office by selling the country to the highest bidder. Of course, that was in 1999. The McCain-Feingold bill was passed in 2002, and then it has been since eviscerated by Supreme Court rulings. So I think we agree, and when you even talk to business, there was some polling by businesses, and 87% of business owners felt that our campaign finance system was broken. And we were talking at the national conference, and one guy in a discussion said, it's just like legalized extortion. So it's not only citizens that want reform, it's also other institutions. So is there hope in sight? And I really think, I keep saying this, we've been trying to get bills passed in our General Assembly for 4 years. So, but I really do think we've had 3 decades of failure, but now our legislators are starting to recognize that people want reform. So when you're looking at just some of the bills that we're looking at this year, restricting personal use of campaign donations, seriously, this bill has been introduced 14 years in a row. And I think finally it passed through the P&E Privileges and Elections Committee last time, which looks at electoral bills. And the woman in charge said, oh, it's a new day for Virginia, and then it went and died in appropriations. But I think there's a real sense of everybody, of legislators saying, yeah, we got to pass this. This looks really bad. And then there's a good bill for those of you in Virginia. There's Jennifer Carroll Foy's a senator she's a senator. And then Joshua Cole from down in Fredericksburg, they're introducing a disclosure of independent expenditures, which is going to force more disclosure and sunshine on dark money coming into Virginia. Virginia. This is a more technical one because we really need more investments in our Department of Elections, because basically you go in there and you try to get data, and it's very difficult to get data. So basically you have to go to Open Secrets to get it. There is VPAP. I love VPAP, Virginia Public Access Project, but what we need is you need to have a public source of access to data for all these campaign filings. And public financing of election, which is viewed as really the panacea to small donors. There was a bill, Marcus Simon from Fairfax introduced it last year. And this year we're having a short session, meaning it's 45 days because it's not a budget year. Next year it's 60 days. This one would just be basically introducing it for local jurisdictions. So if you're in Norfolk, if you're in Alexandria, you can have the right to set up a public financing of elections. Of course, you have to pay for it yourself. So it's like a democracy incubator thing. And this is sort of the approach that we're using with ranked choice voting too. And then campaign finance. Can I tell you a story? We actually got Dominion Energy and Clean Virginia, the two biggest donors in Virginia, to agree to a moratorium on our money arms war. And they looked at this bill, they said they support it. And then at the last minute, Dominion said, well, we want this to make sure that leadership supports it. And do you know, this bill didn't even get a hearing. It was filed, and they realized it would look bad if they voted against it, so they didn't even hear it. We're not going to probably get there this year because it's a short year, but I do think there's more awareness when we talk to legislators of the importance of getting some of these bills passed. In order to do it, we really need to have a plan. We need your voice. And part of it is building up your knowledge and, learning from Hedrick and learning from some of these examples on how to raise your voice effectively, how to raise them collectively, work at a local level. I do think, last year we had our second Democracy Day. Here's an example of a colleague actually drew this cartoon for me, which I thought was pretty funny. It's like, here's Richmond and the regular voters and this expressway for donors. But we did have a democracy. We were there. We raised our voice. We sat in committee meetings. We gave testimony. I'll put this, my colleague Jackie is putting this in the chat. We have a action alert. Just click on it and it will send a message to your elected officials saying you want campaign finance. We need to get these I'm sorry, I'm just admitting somebody who is just in the queue. We need to get legislators hearing from constituents. And one thing I just wanted to say, I think this is pretty cool. I mean, Marie mentioned the states that have officially, sort of endorsed a constitutional amendment, but so much is happening on a local level. Say, for example, I'll just give you this example of Gillette, Wyoming. This is not the bastion of liberalism, but this is an example when a colleague went to a community and had a resolution and they actually passed it unanimously. Because when you talk to people at a local level, they care about these things. And in Virginia, we've had Alexandria Falls Church, Charlottesville, Arlington have passed resolutions. I'm trying to get the Alexandria City Council to put it in their legislative strategy. Every jurisdiction has to have this before the General Assembly. Get some language in there. It only takes one or two people to work with these jurisdictions to put it in their legislation. And I just want to give you the example of George Penn. I don't know if he joined us today, but he's from Wisconsin, and he got over 100 communities in Wisconsin to pass these resolutions. So even though there might be intransigence on the congressional side or even the state side, more and more you have to do this route of engaging with people on a local level. And finally, I just want to invite you to join our third Democracy Day. We're having it on January 21st, and Marie would tell you why this date is important, because it's the 15th anniversary of Citizens United. And for those of you in Virginia, Money Out Trivia, Virginia is actually the home to Citizens United, which is a corporation, but that brought that case. So we're going to be working on campaign finance, ethics reform, ranked choice voting, access to the ballot. So we really hope that you come and join us. It's fun. We're going to have a happy hour. We're going to have a rally at the bell tower. So please sign up and join us. And finally, share your ideas in the chat. We've got a lot of experience in this room. I think we want to hear from you. Jackie, were there any? Oh, I just looked at Heather's thing. Clean Virginia just bought at least one primary in Loudoun. It's interesting, because seriously, the amount of money that's going from Dominion, these two entities, Clean Virginia, into our primaries, yeah, we have two major donors, and that's why we have to have limits.
Yeah.
So, are there any other questions,
Yeah.
Jack?
Well, Cheryl had asked if there's she's out of Illinois, and she wanted to know if there was something to be done to help pass a constitutional amendment federally, how she can help to get it done sooner than later.
Who is that, Heather? Who?
Cheryl.
Okay, I'm not quite sure.
That's
Well,
me.
anyway, oh, Cheryl, thanks. You want to know how you can get involved to pass the constitutional amendment?
I just want to help get this passed however we can. And I don't know if
Okay,
Ellen
well,
will
yeah, that's great. I think we'll talk a little bit more about how we can get involved. We have entry points for action in Virginia, but I think Hedrick and Sam will also give us some guidance. And I just want to do a quick introduction to our next speaker, who is Hedrick Smith. He has been so inspirational. Pardon?
Would you know if there will be any carpools for Democracy Day?
Sorry, I couldn't hear you,
Are there
Jackie.
carpools being organized for Democracy Day?
I think, we're going to, that's what we're going to do in like early January, figure out who is coming and how we can carpool down there. Yeah, so I mean, that's all part of the plan that we're working out with our Good Governance Coalition. The League of Women Voters represent us. So we're having these planning sessions, and we'll be discussing that over the next month. But just to do a quick introduction to Hedrick. Hedrick is really inspirational. Sorry?
There's another comment on Virginia. Is it okay for out-of-state people to help?
Sure.
I guess.
She wants to help.
Out-of-state
Sure.
people.
Yeah, I mean,
Send an email.
Yeah, I'll follow up with this. We'll send out a link to the recording, and then we'll ask people what they want to do. They can join us, and we'll send out how they, information on how they can help, how we can carpool, etc. But let's just go on, and now I'm gonna introduce Hedrick. Hedrick is a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist from the New York Times, and he spent 26 years as a reporter. But after he retired, he's just done some of his best work, I think, in terms of the Democracy Rebellion, which is a 1-hour PBS documentary showing how grassroots citizen movements are winning victories. And his YouTube channel, The People versus the Politicians, really highlights inspirational examples of how ordinary citizens have made a difference in the democracy space. So Hedrick, you want to share some of your experience and guidance?
Well, first of all, I just want to say how happy I am to be here tonight, how impressed I am with how Marie laid out the problem of campaign finance and how you targeted in on what you want to do in Virginia. Basically, you've heard the bad news. The good news is that states are doing this, that in places as distant and different as Alaska and Connecticut and North Carolina and California and Michigan and Colorado, people are actually enacting and pushing through grassroots inspired and powered political reforms. It always feels as though the political system is impossible. It always feels as though you got to climb the Matterhorn or Mount Everest or something like that, and you can't get there. but the truth is you can. And the great news is that Virginia is absolutely ripe for this. You've begun with some gerrymander reform. You've got a whole bunch of bills that Nancy just laid out that have been in and out of the legislature, and there are politicians here or there sticking their thumb in the process or their thumb on the scales and tipping them so they can't happen. And what it's going to take is some citizen push to get it over. Let's go back and think for a minute. Why do we want these reforms? And we kind of object to too much money. We don't like corruption, that kind of stuff. But basically, we want fair elections that are going to give us as citizens a choice. And the politicians, and we got a nutty idea here that if we can get Democrats and Republicans in the legislature just to agree, it'll be fine. No, I'm sorry. The politicians have a different interest from we as voters. The politicians are like marketers. They want to sell something, and we are the customers. As customers, we have a different interest. So we want to get something that often they don't want to give us. Let's just take this thing. I mean, I was amazed by what Nancy said about that terrible New York Congressman George Santos that got run out of the House of Representatives, which is a very bad, tough place to get run out of. They ran him out of there. And she says what he did would have gone clear in Virginia. Well, oh my God, if you can't fix that, I mean, you're, what do they say about the floating island? We don't want to say anything about that. Disclosure. Can you do it? Listen, in Arizona this year, they passed a really good campaign disclosure law. Let me repeat that. The voters in Arizona, who gave a majority to Donald Trump, nonetheless said they want disclosure. And they called it the Voters' Right to Know Act. Nice name, Voters' Right to Know Act. They passed it. It's important. It covers everybody. No dark money. Remember what Marie was saying with all those super PACs and everything? It's dark money. You can get away with it. You can't find it out. Not under the Arizona disclosure law, not under California's disclosure law. If you get a good disclosure law, it says simply anyone who puts $50,000, and we're not talking billions or millions, right? We're not up in all those seconds we just looked at. Anybody who puts $50,000, anybody, not just a candidate, not just a party, but the PACs, the super PACs, the nonprofits, the everybody's, has to disclose their donors. Any donor who contributed $5,000 or more must be disclosed. Bingo. Think about it. It sounds impossible. We've just been listening to mountains, to oceans of problems and numbers. And this is just a simple idea. It's the best way. Why do it? It's the best way of fighting corruption. Stopping under the table payoffs. Rich donors buying friends in government. We all know that. Everybody is smart enough in the political game not to say, well, if you give me $10,000 or if I give you $10,000, you got to vote for this. No. They don't say it that easily because that's a bribe. That's corruption. They just say, be my friend and talk to me when the bill comes up that I'm interested in. And of course they do. But dark money and donor money is very important because why? Donors are a voting queue. If you know that Dominion Power or the banks or the oil companies or some group or rich individuals are behind some candidate or some ballot measure, then you get a pretty good clue of what's really up. Knowing who's putting up the money, where the money's coming from, which candidates it's going to, and who's in bed with whom and who's in whose pocket gives you a clue as a voter what to do with your vote. So disclosure is the most important. People talk about the disinfectant, like about all these nice names. No, it's really practical knowledge. If the bad guys don't want you to know, the powerful people don't want you to know where their money's going. If they don't want you to know why, because they know if you know, you don't like it. So very simply, go for disclosure. And it's being done all over the country. Some are really good disclosure laws. Arizona's is one of the best. California's is one of the best. Some of the others are not so good, but get the disclosure So they put the names of the people, the names of the companies up on the internet where you can find it. And maybe you're not going to find it, but somebody from the Richmond Times-Dispatch or somebody from some Northern Virginia newspaper or some radio is going to find it, and they're going to put it out for it, and you're going to know it. Now, the second reform that I found in the money area that's really amazing is public funding of campaigns. And people say, oh, it's terrible tax money and so forth. Well, most states that have public funding have actually managed to fund it without tax money. They found all kinds of ways. There's money that flows to states through property losses and one thing and another that funds these things. But probably 15 or 20 states in the country have public funding of campaigns. And usually they have public funding of judicial campaigns. And somehow we have an idea that the courts ought to be cleaner than other parts of government. So we really don't want a lot of rich people, lawyers and others, paying for judicial campaigns. But other states have not just the judicial campaigns, but all of them. Maybe you remember Larry Hogan, governor of Maryland. Larry Hogan actually beat the Democratic money machine in Maryland, 8-10 years ago, by getting public funding. Maryland had public funding for the governor's race and some of the statewide races. The best public funding program that I've come across in my reporting is in the state of Connecticut, and it's utterly amazing. They got it because there was corruption. The governor up there got kickbacks from contractors and one thing and another. A bunch of mayors in Waterbury and Danbury and Bridgeport and so forth got caught with their money in the till. And so even, believe it or not, a legislature. This was not a public referendum. This was a legislature and a governor that passed public funding in Connecticut. And it is now used by almost 100% of the legislators in both parties running for the state legislature. It covers the governor, the lieutenant governor, the attorney general, state auditor, state treasurer, and so forth. And it is has been used now through 5 or 6 election cycles. It's amazing. In order to qualify, the candidates have to raise a little bit of money, but they can't raise more than $100. That's the maximum donation. And they have to raise a lot of small donations to prove that they're actually a viable candidate. But once they do that, they have to then take an oath, sign a pledge. In order to get public funding, they have to say no more private funding, no more corporate funding, no more rich donor funding, and so, and they have beaten the rich donors up there. And it's utterly amazing. I have personally interviewed multiple members of the Connecticut State Senate and House of Representatives said, I could not have afforded to run. I could not have raised money in Bridgeport or New Haven or Danbury or you name it on my own without public funding. It has allowed citizen legislators, ordinary people, doctors and professors and former Navy veterans and a woman who runs a program for breast cancer victims and so forth. These people are in the legislature. The legislature now has more women in it. It now has more minorities in it. It has more people with incomes under $150,000 in it. And it starts taking up very different kinds of legislation. It is a phenomenal program. I'm utterly amazed. I've been in Massachusetts, I've been in New York, I've been in Connecticut, and the other states around Connecticut don't even know what a revolutionary system Connecticut has. Maine has it to some degree, Arizona has it, Minnesota has it, but public funding of campaigns is an enormously important and doable goal. But the important thing is just to try. The parties are going to try to keep you out. Now, there are all kinds of other reforms that are at work. In Alaska, one of the most important things they've done is nonpartisan primaries, so that independents can vote, so that everybody votes in the same primary, Democrats and Republicans alike. I mean, sometimes you go to the primaries, and if you're a Republican or a Democrat, you may prefer the Republican candidate for governor, but the Democratic candidate for senator, and the Republican candidate for your mayor, and the Democratic candidate for your legislator. You can't do that in a nonpartisan primary where everybody votes in the same primary and all the candidates vote together. You get your choice. And what happens also, and it's begun to happen, we see it now in Washington, in California and now starting in Alaska, you start to have candidates move towards the political center. Because if you've got all the voters voting in one primary, and you have all the candidates voting in one primary, well, you're going to start to appeal across party lines. Extremism is no longer so attractive. You can't run and win as an extremist. And we've got examples of that in Washington State in particular. You know, there's a moderate Republican running in a very conservative Republican district who would never make it into the general election, but because of the nonpartisan primary, he's number 2 in the among the Republicans. And then when he runs in the general election, he's number 1 and he wins. And in Seattle, where it's very liberal and very Democratic, you have a centrist Democratic member of Congress who's pro-business, who wouldn't normally win if there were a Democratic primary. The answer is, if you want to move towards the center, if you want to get moderation and compromise and begin to see the American political system work again, those kinds of reforms work. My point really is, we can do it. The states are the key. Everybody looks to Washington and says, Washington is the place where we got to get the answers, get the big program, get the big vote. Well, guess what? Washington has been trying to pass one kind of political reform or another for at least 2 decades and gotten nowhere. All the political reforms that you see, gerrymander reform in Michigan and Colorado and California, these nonpartisan primaries I've been talking about, public funding in Connecticut, this disclosure law in Arizona, these are all happening at the states. This is a great opportunity. What Nancy is talking to you about is a great opportunity. This is your moment. And legislatures, politicians listen. People think they don't. The lobbyists are listened to because they're there every day. They stay there and they talk. And of course, they contribute money if they can, but they stay there and they talk. And part of it is, we say, well, government's not working. Well, it's working for the people who are making it work for them. And the answer is, we have to make government work for us. Thanks.
Thanks, Hedrick.
Thanks. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce Sam as our next speaker. I consider him my friend and he's my mentor. He was my inspiration to join American Promise after I heard his presentation in April of 2017 in Princeton, New Jersey. He founded the anti-poverty advocacy group Results and designed an approach to citizen activism, which guided the structure of the Citizens Climate Lobby. The 2024, which was a 30th anniversary edition, is that correct, Sam? Reclaiming Our Democracy, Every Citizen's Guide to Transformational Advocacy, was named an editor's pick by Publishers Weekly Book Life. Kirkus Reviews wrote, overall, Sam's call to democratic participation is inspiring, a handbook for aspiring activists that readers will find to be both inspiring and practical. Sam will tell us more about his model of transformational citizen advocacy.
Thank you, Marie. Thank you, Hedrick. Thank you, Nancy. And thanks to everyone. I kind of feel that the system is broken, but citizens are broken too. So I thank you for being here and your commitment to that healing. My section here is really about inspiration. I'm going to tell a few stories, share a few quotes, give a few concepts that'll hopefully inspire us to Democracy Day, January 21st in Richmond, Virginia. And so I've been writing a lot of journalists. I want to share a bit of a letter that I sent to journalists a week or two ago. Quote, for many Americans, this election has delivered exhaustion and divisiveness. After the election, Tom Nichols wrote in The Atlantic, quote, Americans must stay engaged and make their voices heard at every turn. Liz Cheney tweeted, citizens across the country must now be the guardrails of democracy, but most Americans still wonder how, and even if, they can make a difference between elections. What are the options? 1, protesting. Important, but it's usually not the long game. 2, signing email form letters, which only 3% of congressional staff say is highly effective. Often gestures. 3, taking a 2-year nap until the next election. Sadly, the preferred route of many. but few in your audience, I'm talking to these journalists, know about transformational advocacy, which helps you change an issue and changes you in the process. This book includes stories of people who met with elected officials on the other side of their issues, people like Ellie Sparks, who went from experiencing what she called climate trauma to meeting her members of Congress and calling the experience sacred and profound, and people like Lisa Jordan, who after meeting with congressional offices in Washington, D.C., said, "This work is the best medicine for when you're feeling hopeless or have sleepless nights. It's the best way to avoid despair." So my book is mostly about making a difference between elections, which is something we need to do. I'm gonna try and shorten my 15-minute thing. What I was gonna share right now, which I'm not going to, which is really important, and it's a tool for each of us, is what I describe as knowing your why and sharing it. And I talk about Marshall Ganz's story of self. What happened in your life, and what decisions did you make that got you to this commitment? And I would normally tell mine right now and ask you to think about yours. What happened in your life, and what decisions did you make that got you to this call, that got you to this commitment? It's very important. In January, I was interviewed on 1A. I just got an email from one of their producers. They said it's like 5 million listeners a week to 500 stations. This was question number 2 for me by Todd Zwillich. Quote, "The passive nature to our politics now, you can feel beat down by it. I mean, this is my career and I feel beat down by it. It's much more of an effort for me. I don't participate the same way others do because I'm a political journalist, but I do have to pay attention. It's a grind. It's a grind, Sam. I mean, I know you know that. What am I feeling? What's the way out of that?" That was question number 2 in this national audience. The first thing I said to him was, Apollo astronaut Rusty Schweickart said, "We aren't passengers on Spaceship Earth, we're the crew." Well, are we? And if we're crew, how does crew operate? What does crew do? Second thing I said was, futurist and climate activist Alex Steffens said, "In fact, these days, cynicism is obedience." Well, yeah, if I'm cynical, I'm obedient to the way things are. I'm not going to do anything about it. Why would I if nothing I do makes a difference? The main idea in reclaiming our democracy is transformational advocacy. We all know transactional, sign the petition, transaction complete. But with transformational advocacy, you're trained, encouraged, and then succeed at doing things as an advocate that you never thought you could do, like meet with a member of Congress and bring them on board to your issue. And when you do those things that you thought you couldn't do, you see yourself in a new light. You see yourself as a community leader. I've skipped another story, but I'm going to tell one story and close with a quote. And I'm pulling up my slides so I can show you a picture. In 2019, President Trump called for a 29% cut to the global fund to fight AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria after the global fund and its partners had saved 38 million lives between 2002, when it was launched, and 2017. Who hears about 38 million lives saved? It was a time for a 3-year replenishment of the global fund, and other countries would likely follow the US lead. Now, most people didn't hear about President Trump's call for a 29% cut, and if they did, they'd probably throw up their hands. What can you do? You can't fight City Hall. The people I know roll up their sleeves and got to work. They got hundreds of members of Congress, Republicans and Democrats, to sign letters to Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and the top appropriators, to co-sponsor resolutions in the House and Senate supporting the Global Fund to fight AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria. My question is, what do these revolutionary volunteer advocates look like? And you just need to go to the gallery view if you want to see what they look like. And they also look like Margaret Smith of Dallas, Texas, seen here with her Senator Ted Cruz. She said, I learned in results that I hold Senator Cruz's hands with two hands and I don't let go until I finish my laser talk on the Global Fund to fight AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria. And that year, 2019, was the first year Senator Cruz ever supported something that they'd asked for. He was a co-sponsor of the Senate resolution. Instead of President Trump's proposed 29% cut, two House Republicans and two House Democrats stood on a stage in Lyon, France at the Global Fund replenishment and announced that the Congress would provide a 16% increase to the Global Fund, which it did, and President Trump signed into law. By 2022, over a 20-year period, the Global Fund partnership had saved 59 million lives since its inception. I'm going to close with this quote. Since I cut two other things out, I'm going to say it twice. This is from George Bernard Shaw's Man and Superman. I've done this talk 70 times this year, so this is like my 70th time here. This is the true joy in life, the being used for a purpose, recognized by yourself as a mighty one, the being a force of nature, instead of a selfish, feverish little clod of ailments and grievances, complaining that the world will not devote itself to making you happy. I am of the opinion that my life belongs to the whole community, and it is my privilege to do for it whatever I can. I want to be thoroughly used up when I die, for the harder I work, the more I live. I rejoice in life for its own sake. Life is no brief candle to me. It is a sort of splendid torch, which I've got hold of for the moment, and I want to make it burn as brightly as possible before handing it on to future generations. One more time.
A great quote.
This is a true joy in life, the being used for a purpose, recognized by yourself as a mighty one, the being a force of nature, instead of a selfish, feverish little clod of ailments and grievances, complaining that the world will not devote itself to making you happy. I am of the opinion that my life belongs to the whole community, and it is my privilege to do for it whatever I can. I want to be thoroughly used up when I die, for the harder I work, the more I live. I rejoice in life for its own sake. Life is no brief candle to me. It is a sort of splendid torch, which I've got hold of for the moment, and I want to make it burn as brightly as possible before handing it on to future generations. Thank you for your commitment to making that torch burn as brightly as possible. Thank you.
And that is why we love Sam Daley-Harris. Sam, that is wonderful. And he set up results 45 years ago. That's amazing. It's a wonderful. And I think that the stories are so inspirational. I just wanted to share something. We went down to the Rockingham County Fair, which is down by Harrisonburg, conservative area. It's an agricultural fair. So we were there for a week, and it was remarkable in this time of polarization that we talked to people. One woman, it was funny because she said, "Don't you think the election was stolen?" And I said, "No, I don't know. I think Youngkin won the last election." And so it was sort of, we were laughing. And then I said, "But do you think the billionaires ought to buy our election?" And we engaged in this conversation that was it really made me feel good about knowing that I can bridge these gaps in because we're working on an issue that is supported by 90% of Americans. We ought to be able to move that down the road and affect change. But we can only do it when people raise their voices. And as Sam says, you can't sit in your chair and feel bad about things. You have to take action. So we'd love to hear from the group, if you have ideas. I know Rick Kinsky is very engaged in the Northern Neck. Lynn Chipkin, I mean, bless her heart, has been trying to get meetings with the legislators. And I think, Sam, I don't know, you and your experiences, say, for example, Lynn, we're trying to get meetings. We've got Lynn keeps sending him the representatives emails asking to have meetings. How do you keep going? I mean,
Well,
how?
here's the thing, can we see if Andrew's got a question, or I just
Oh,
want to hear
sorry,
from
Andrew has a
others rather
question. Yeah,
than ourselves.
yeah.
Sorry about my messy house, but I mean, to me, the way this works is we have to show direct, immediate impacts of the corruption, and we need to call it corruption. We also, like, and the biggest example is in our area is the casino in Tyson's Corner, where this guy Clemente wants a casino. Nobody in the community wants it, and he's spending millions of dollars. And there's specific politicians, Senator Marsden and others, who are taking this corrupt money. And really, the only way we can make this change is we need to hold them accountable. I mean, they need to fear primaries, because I know that the politicians who aren't taking the money and trying to do the right thing, they're afraid of primaries. And so we have to be willing to fight in the party against the politicians who are corrupt. And we need to call them corrupt. We need to not be nice. We need to go at them and fight them, because, you know, people like Senator Marsden are selling us out. They're selling their community out, and we need to call them out. So that's my feeling, that it has to be grassroots. I've gotten 50 people to sign a petition, 50 Democratic activists to sign a petition against the casino. And we're going to have a heart-to-heart talk with some of our politicians and let them know that they're taking money is utterly unacceptable, because that's it can't
Could you
be
tell me
nice.
where is his constituency?
It's south of ours.
Okay, well, anyway, let me just say a couple of things. I would urge you to look at things like maybe getting some training if you need it, but writing some letters to the editor in local papers that are read locally on this issue. B, getting a meeting with that senator and others who are not that senator or representatives. I mean, you know, I'm going to just say this one thing. I've been communicating with the author of a book called Hope for Cynics, The Surprising Science of Human Goodness. And he talks about, when I'm cynical, it's like I'm playing poker and I close my hand before the game even starts. No, you got to leave the hand open. So yeah, that senator, meet with that senator and any senators or assembly people around you.
I think there's other politicians we have to target, but my point is we have to get the core activists who feel abused because the money counts more than them, and turn them against the politicians and fight them. And
but
we have to be
beyond a petition, like face to face.
Oh no,
I'm
they've
not
all been in my house. I mean,
Pardon?
these senators, they've been in my house like 7 times. So it's not like, but that's you get
Great.
active in your party, and then you hold the politicians accountable.
Yeah,
That's
good.
That's it, but we can't be deferential. We can't be, and you know, because we have to exert power against them, and it has to be a different kind of power. But you know, I've been to a lot of meetings and I've done the advocacy thing, but I think the threat of a good old fashioned primary is more effective. They need to fear the good ones who are not taking the money, and the money's really blatant. I had a state senator tell me that the casino people offered him $150,000 in contributions if he'd flip his vote. I mean, it's that blatant.
No.
And we need to defend the ones that stand up to them and fight the ones that don't.
By the way, if that's not against the law in Virginia, it should be.
No, I know
put
it's
into law.
not. I know it's
Well,
not.
it should be. I mean, if they offered him $150,000 to switch his vote, in most states, that blatant a bribe is illegal. If it's not illegal in Virginia, maybe that's where you need to start.
Well, and they're actually proud of it. That they're not subtle, because they use it to intimidate people, right? If you don't vote our way, not only will we not give you money, we're going to find someone else and give them money and primary you. So we've got to fight this.
I
Yeah,
think that you really got to get the basic stuff. If a bribe is legal, then a bribe ought to be made illegal. That ought to be fairly
Oh,
simple
yeah.
to sell to people.
but I mean, yeah,
Anyone-
this is a big issue in Virginia, this casino issue in the gaming industry and all the money going into legislators' pockets. Like, I must say, you guys in Fairfax, you're amazing. You've got the journalists on it through the patch and stuff. But yeah, you need to shame these people who are taking the money. I mean, Scott Serbal's taking money from Marsden. I think that's the only way you can do it is shaming them. But
Or make it against the law.
Well, that's step one is shaming them. Step two is defeating them. Step three is passing a law.
yeah.
Step one is passing the law.
My suggestion, and I'm not in Virginia, is maybe let Sam actually talk to you, because Ted Cruz never approved that money for the global AIDS. I forget exactly the term for
yeah.
years and years and years and years. And that woman took a different approach, and she was successful in that approach. And that type of approach is what Sam talks about. So maybe just listen to him for a minute to take a slightly different perspective.
Yeah.
On the approach.
They had 40 legislative meetings in Texas on that issue and 25 letters and op-eds published on that issue. And it wasn't just Margaret Smith only, but she was right in there at the same time too. I have no problem with, Andrew, what you're saying. It's not my approach, but I have no problem with you taking it. My whole work, and I'm not pushing it on anyone, is relational, even with the bad guys, and I don't need you to
Yeah.
agree at all. But the bottom line is stop the damn petitions and get face to face with people,
On the,
in person with people, with
The
editors,
petition-
with your letters to the editor, with your elected officials, with people above your senator, whether it's the federal congressman or below them, and in whatever, whether it's the city
The
council or
the purpose of the
commissioners or
petition is to
whatever.
show that we have the people behind us. That's why you
Fine.
do the petition.
Yeah, yeah. Good.
But
Who
anyway, I
else?
think that Andrew in this anti-casino group is showing some of the best tactics in terms of making this visible through, having buses going down to Richmond and doing lobbying. Yeah, some of these politicians, so it's hard to get them to, agree. I want Lynn, can you ask Sam, you've done so much work on trying to get a meeting with your legislator. Can you explain in that, maybe Sam can give us some guidance?
What?
Well, I've been trying to contact him, and they've been responsive, but very slowly, and they just keep asking, well, who's going to be at this meeting? Can I have their address? And it's kind of like a stall tactic almost, and I have to keep getting back to them, and it's just been going on about 2 or 3 months now. So
Just show up.
Hmm?
Maybe you just show up.
Oh, well, he's not usually in his office, but
Yeah. I mean, the bottom line is, I would say, play the game, jump through the hoops, get physically with them, meet with the aide. Maybe they have one aide total, but do whatever steps you have to do. Are there other people? Who's a large employer in the district? Who's a major pastor of a large church in the district? Who could you enroll to join you and maybe add their voice to getting this appointment? But if they say who are they and where do they live, tell them who are they and where they live and get in and see them, kind of thing. And yeah, stall tactics, big time.
well, I'm persistent.
Yay.
Yeah, and Lynn, I think that Sam mentioned something that's really important that we sometimes forget. Even if we can't get to the legislators, it's worth building up a relationship with the staff people. So maybe that's what we should do.
And
Is
with the staff, for the staff to say she's got her act together, the elected official needs to meet with her. I mean, not to staff to stay with staff, but to start with staff and move on up the chain.
And
Yeah.
Sam, your other advice has always been talk to the staff and find out who is influential for this. It might be apparent from their website or from the news, when you follow them in the news, who do they meet with, who do they tout their relationships with, what have you, but it may not. speaking to the staffer could give you could give you an insight as to, well, who would be influential to this legislator to get them to listen to me and maybe change their mind. It can be another way to approach that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for that advice.
Any other questions? If not, I'd really like to thank everybody. I think the power of this discussion was because many of us were feeling so despondent about what's happening federally. And so I think that there's a beauty in just pivoting, like Hedrick said. Let's just let's look what we can do at a state and a local level. So. And I know Rick is very active in that. Anyway, thanks very much. Thanks, Marie, Sam, and Hedrick. And I'll follow up, and we'll put together and send this out to the more than 70 people who signed up but didn't come. But it's nice to know that you were willing to spend the evening with us on this important issue. Who is Heather? Phil Church said, Heather, share your contact with us, Phil. Okay. Anyway, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks,
have a good.
everyone.
Bye. Barb and Steve,
Bye.
always nice seeing you online. Bye, Hedrick.
Bye.
Bye,
Janet.
Nancy. Good luck.
Bye.
Well done.